For millions of Americans, today's question is simple, and yet, life-changing. Will there finally be a $2,000 fourth stimulus check for Social Security, SSDI, and SSI recipients in 2025? The whispers have turned into conversations, and those conversations are now dominating living rooms, senior centers, and Capitol Hill alike. Something is shifting in Washington, and the outcome could determine how millions of older Americans, disabled workers, and struggling families survive the months ahead. It has been nearly 5 years since the first stimulus check in the early days of the pandemic. Back then, it was a lifeline, $1, $200, $600, and later $1,400 payments that helped Americans weather a storm no one saw coming. Rent was paid. Groceries were bought. Medications were filled. And for a brief moment, the federal government was seen not as a distant machine, but as a helping hand in the darkest hours. But since then, the silence has been deafening. Fast forward to 2025. Inflation has cooled on paper, yet the reality in grocery stores and pharmacies tells a different story. A gallon of milk that cost $2.89 just 3 years ago is now over $4. Gasoline, hovering around $3.80 in most states, is still far from affordable. Prescription drug prices, blood pressure pills, insulin, arthritis medication, have climbed steadily, eating away at fixed incomes. For those living on Social Security, SSDI, or SSI, the numbers simply don't add up. And this is why the debate over a potential fourth stimulus check of $2,000 has reignited with such force. Advocacy groups representing seniors, veterans, and the disabled have been relentless, reminding lawmakers that more than 70 million Americans depend on these benefits, and many are living on less than $1,500 a month. One advocacy letter delivered to Congress in June 2025 put it bluntly: you cannot ask America's elderly to choose between food and medicine. Yet every day, millions are forced to do exactly that. Inside Washington, the push has grown louder. A bipartisan group of lawmakers, led by voices from both the Senate and the House, has floated what they call an Emergency Relief for Seniors and the Disabled Act. Early drafts hint at a one-time $2,000 payment for all Social Security, SSDI, and SSI recipients. The proposed rollout date? As early as late fall 2025, though nothing has been finalized. Supporters argue that this is not charity, it's justice. They point out that seniors have endured the worst of rising costs, all while their cost of living adjustments lag behind reality. Last year's Social Security COLA increase was just 3.2%, while many essentials spiked by double digits. You can't live off percentages when the grocery bill rises faster than your benefits, one senator said in a fiery floor speech. For them, the stimulus is about restoring dignity, ensuring that those who built the nation are not left behind in its twilight years. But critics see it differently. Fiscal conservatives warn that another direct payment could fuel debt and deficits already spiraling out of control. They argue that targeted aid, such as expanding SNAP or housing vouchers, would be more effective than blanket checks. Others fear that a new round of payments might even reignite inflation, undoing years of delicate economic balancing by the Federal Reserve. One prominent think tank declared just last week, handing out $2,000 checks sounds compassionate, but it risks repeating the mistakes of the pandemic-era spending spree. Caught in the middle are ordinary Americans, people like 72-year-old Margaret from Ohio. She relies on $1,425 a month from Social Security, yet her rent alone is $900. That leaves her $525 to cover utilities, groceries, co-pays for her medication, and the little things most people take for granted. I skip meals some days, she admits quietly. If that $2,000 check came through, it wouldn't solve everything. But it would give me breathing room. For once, I could pay all my bills in the same month. Or consider Daniel, a 58-year-old on SSDI in Texas, who lost his mobility after a workplace accident. His benefit is just under $1,300 a month. The rising cost of his prescription pain medication alone eats up nearly a quarter of that. Every time I hear talk of a check, I feel hope, he says. But I've learned not to believe until it's in my hands. And so, the atmosphere is thick with suspense. Economists are split. Lawmakers are divided. Yet the momentum feels different this time. What makes 2025 unique is the political storm brewing in Washington. With a presidential election year just around the corner, neither party wants to appear indifferent to the struggles of seniors and disabled Americans, one of the most reliable voting blocs in the country. President Trump has remained ambiguous, acknowledging the hardship but stopping short of promising checks. In a recent town hall, when pressed by a retiree in Florida, he responded, "We're looking very strongly at ways to support our seniors. You're going to be very happy. Very soon." It was the kind of remark that sparks headlines without confirming details. Meanwhile, congressional leaders on both sides are pressing for clarity, knowing that inaction could come at a political cost. The debate now hinges on timing. Some insiders suggest that if an agreement is reached, the Treasury could begin dispersing payments by November 2025, just ahead of the holiday season. Others caution that any delay could push checks into the first quarter of 2026, turning what many see as an urgent lifeline into a political bargaining chip. For everyday Americans, however, the calendar doesn't matter. The need is immediate. The cost of housing, food, and medicine does not pause for congressional debates. Every day, choices are made at the kitchen table: do I pay the electric bill, or do I fill my prescription? Do I buy healthy groceries, or do I stretch canned goods for another week? Behind every statistic are real lives, millions of them, waiting, hoping, and praying for relief. And so we arrive at this moment, historic, uncertain, yet undeniably significant. Whether or not the $2,000 fourth stimulus check becomes reality, one truth cannot be denied: America's seniors, disabled, and most vulnerable citizens are demanding to be heard. Their voices are louder than ever, their struggles clearer than ever, and their patience thinner than ever. The next few weeks could determine not just the fate of a stimulus payment, but the larger question of how a nation treats those who built its past and now depend on its support. Will Washington deliver dignity, or delay? That answer is still unfolding. But tonight, for millions watching and waiting, there is at least a glimmer of possibility. A chance that relief may be on the horizon. A chance that $2,000 could mean the difference between surviving and truly living. This is more than a policy debate. It is a test of values. And for every American senior, veteran, and disabled worker still holding on, the outcome will not simply be measured in dollars, it will be measured in hope, dignity, and the promise that they are not forgotten. And here's another layer to this story that few are talking about. The US is not alone in this debate. Across the world, from Canada to Germany to Japan, governments have been forced to face the same question: how do you protect seniors and the disabled when inflation and rising costs erode fixed incomes? In Canada, seniors recently received targeted top-up payments, while Japan has introduced direct subsidies for elder care. Yet here in America, the conversation is louder but the solutions remain stalled. For many, it raises a sobering thought. If other nations can act swiftly to protect their most vulnerable, why does Washington hesitate? Will not let you fall. And that, perhaps, is the greatest stimulus of all. And if you're following this story as closely as I am, you know it's far from over. In fact, the next few weeks could decide whether this plan advances or fades into another forgotten promise. I'll be covering every twist, every new statement, and every deadline right here. So if you want the truth without the spin, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now and join this community. Because together, we'll hold leaders accountable, and we'll make sure the voices of America's seniors and disabled are never ignored again.